Hi, Kathy.
The code ring thing, they're having another meeting.
Yeah, they have business going on down there. Yeah. Okay, well, welcome again to our OCIA sessions. We'll start as always with our prayer. So let me go ahead and share this. In case anyone joins us online, I'll share that too. Okay. All right, so we start as always in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. You have heard that was said to your ancestors, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and will be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that was said to your ancestors, you shall not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment, and whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin, and whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and will be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said to your ancestors, you shall not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Racha, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar. Go first and be reconciled with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court with him. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard. You'll be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, will not be released until you have paid the last penny. Okay, so I decided to break with our trend of using the commandments for our Lexio because, well, thou shalt not kill. That's pretty much all it is for the fifth commandment. I think Jesus kind of expands on that here, which helps us maybe get more context we're going to be talking about tonight, right? So it's interesting that, Jesus kind of expands this, right? It's not just like, hey, your actions aren't the thing that really you have to worry about. It's really where that starts. Your action starts with your own thoughts, with your own feelings. And in some ways, it might feel impossible to kind of overcome those things. But I think there's also a difference in kind between feeling something that's maybe a stimulus from something exterior to us, and then dwelling on that feeling, that thought, and then acting out upon it, right? What Jesus really kind of saying here is that, when murder really starts when we become angry with somebody. And there's kind of two different kinds of anger. And the anger that Jesus is really referring to here is what we call malicious anger, which is really more of a vengeful anger. The ones that kind of fosters in our heart, well, the logical outcome of that is this act of revenge, right? So we're called to really foster our feelings, our thoughts in a way that is accordant with the divine commands. And it's interesting to hear Jesus says, you've heard it said, but I say to you, right? So also kind of get this understanding that he's also that divine lawgiver that gave those first commandments to Moses, right? And that's rather controversial, right? Because Jesus is taking authority here and ownership that only God can really take, which is maybe why the Pharisees and the Sadducees are really kind of, taken aback by that. But he actually starts this passage with, we should have the same kind of righteousness as that of the Sadducees and Pharisees. So in other words, the 10 Commandments is sort of a low bar. That's kind of the minimum, right? The harder part is actually kind of expanding upon that and living a Christian life in accord with that. Thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, heresies?
Could you break down the second paragraph for me? There's a lot of words
Sure.
I don't know in there.
Okay, yeah. So racha, for instance, right?
Yeah. Or people maybe too.
Right. So racha is an actual, what it means is idiot or imbecile. It's actually an Aramaic term.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jesus kind of bringing out his own language kind of in this passage, right? The Sanhedrin is actually the governing authority of Israel. That's the Sadducees and the Pharisees that were kind of the ones that kind of ensured the law was observed, right? And Gehenna is actually
fiery, apparently.
Well, it's a burn pit that they kept outside of the city, and so it's all in Jewish culture. Gehenna was always associated with hell, right? It's this place this place you don't want to be, right? But even so, and some may actually determine Gehenna may not necessarily be hell. It might be some form of purgatory. Because when Jesus is talking about hey, if you settle with your opponent while you're going to court, otherwise, they'll be put in prison and you won't get out until they actually pay the last penny. Well, yeah. So in other words, okay, well, there must be that doesn't seem like hell. That's not an eternal place. So we put that into context. That may be what Jesus is kind of saying there, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Otherwise, we just move on. It's all good. No thoughts. Okay.
Did you say where this was from?
Matthew 5, verses 21 through 26. It should sound familiar.
Yes.
Why? It was from the Gospels past Sunday. So this is actually it's a longer gospel. Yeah, this is kind of part of that gospel. Yeah, right. So okay, let's go ahead and share the lesson we're going to discuss. Here we go. And actually, I can probably turn this off because nobody's really here. Okay. All right. We understand first that in charity. So in other words, these as with every commandment, it's not just simply like, hey, don't kill, right? And in reality, probably none of us have had that desire. Maybe we've had desire for revenge, but I don't know. It's very rare to find someone who's had the desire really to actually take another human life, right? And so in that regard, this may be kind of foreign, but as we heard in the gospel we just talked about, it's not just that. It's not just external action. There's other things going on. But everything we're talking about when it talks about these last 7 are directed towards this understanding of life and charity. These virtues and aspects are universal, meaning that if it's good for one, it should be good for all, right? And these are things that are kind of transcendental. These are things that are the best for all of us, right? Regardless of circumstance. So maybe the one that's most common, and this one is, it's said that a priest hears every sin within about 6 months of his priesthood, and that's true. And somebody asked, well, you've heard people say they killed somebody, and the answer to that is, well, yes. And the way you usually hear that is through this act of abortion. So we read in Jeremiah that before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. So we have to understand that human life is very precious. It's very unique. It's actually really something that's valued above, invaluable, right? And since the very beginning, the church has always believed that all human life is sacred from conception to natural death. So if you look at the Didache, which is actually in that packet that we have in our it's actually online and with the stuff and everything. Since the first century, the church has affirmed the moral evil of procured abortion, which has been contrary to the societies in which she upheld it. That many societies, even before the time of Christianity and even after, have had some concept of abortion, whether it be taken like an herb or some kind of plant that would stop the process of gestation, right? And the church said that's wrong. Now, there's confusion in some ways when we look at things like the writings of St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, and these two have actually been used as kind of arguments against this pro-life understanding, because in it, they weren't trying to answer the question really of when the soul and the body unite. What they were actually trying to answer was kind of what the ideal, what the concept of marriage is all about, right? And within that, there was like these questions that arose, like, okay, well, when does the soul and the body become together? When does these things become a person? Now, we have to understand that in the philosophical context that Augustine and Aquinas were working in, they actually come from Aristotle. And Aristotle was writing that, well, life, anything that has life, the evidence of an animus, an animal, a soul, that's what animus means, soul, is movement. So if there's no movement, there's no soul. Like a rock, it doesn't move, no soul, right? A plant grows, okay, that moves, there's a soul. An animal walks, there's a soul. So when it comes to a pregnancy, a baby, they would say, well, once the woman starts showing, that would be indication that there's a soul, because there's obviously growth there. Now we have to understand, right, that Augustine and Aquinas didn't have the scientific information that we have today. And so it's very reasonable to say, well, we can't really see what goes on in there right now. And so maybe it's, I think Augustine said it was like 30 days or like the first trimester. But again, what he's going off is, where's the growth there? Aquinas went a little bit further based on his understanding, said, and they thought at the time in scientific study that it took the sperm about 8 days to get to the ovum. And so he would be like, we got about 8 days before the soul enters the egg, in which case, okay, yeah, there would be some gestation there. But regardless, they always upheld in their writings that even stopping that process would be wrong. And it comes down to this understanding of potentiality versus actuality. That in the marital act, there's something profound that happens there, regardless of the circumstances. And that can be kind of hard for us to kind of struggle with when it comes to cases like rape and incest. That no matter what, as soon as that egg and that sperm meet, there's a new life, there's a new DNA, there's a soul present in the fact that the items split, right? The cell grows. In that regard, that is evidence of life. And not just any life, human life. And they would even argue to stop that process, whether within those first trimester or 8 days, would still be wrong morally, because you're stopping something that's actually God is willing. Now, when those instances of cases of like, rape and incest, those are difficult cases. We would first uphold that, that shouldn't happen, right? Those are tragedies. That's wrong that they even occurred in those regards. But that life that's brought forth from that action is still innocent. It has done nothing to deserve being killed. And even going to things like the death penalty, we'll talk about in a minute, is death penalty warranted in those instances? We'll talk about that in a second. So we really are going off of what science has revealed. The sad thing about it is that if you were to ask biologists, today, and even more so 10 years ago, when does life begin? About 95 to 98% of them would say at the moment of conception, whether it be an animal, whether it be a human, whatever. But when we start talking about abortion, there's something like, oh, well, wait a minute, that's a different scenario because we have free will and these other things don't. Well, what does that make any difference? Right? There's a new DNA, there's a new soul, there's a new life that's present. So what about that soul? How does that have any say in it? So it can be difficult, right? So this kind of goes to these questions about, like, isn't a woman in charge of her own body? And the answer to that is yes. But the problem we're seeing here is that there's a different body now that's present here, right? And that goes on the other side of the spectrum too. So we look at like the end of life. So euthanasia. Isn't it compassionate to give someone that's suffering a way out to end that suffering through death? And the church would say, well, if we were just directed towards ourselves and this were the only life that we were living, yeah, maybe you can make that argument. But we also understand that there's grace in suffering too. We actually have a whole sacrament that's dedicated towards that, called anointing of the sick, right? That we understand we're no closer to our Lord on the cross than when we're suffering with him. And there's grace that comes from that, including a mission for that person to show other people what it means to suffer with dignity. Now, when we talk about things like medical ethics, there's a lot of nuance there, right? And in general, when we come to end-of-life issues, we talk about extraordinary and ordinary care. And in general, ordinary care would be something like food, water, air, right? As long as those things can be reasonably given, that life has dignity, that life should be upheld. Now, there are scenarios where maybe that becomes extraordinary. So anyone in the medical field will know, right? So like with feeding tubes, in general, feeding tubes can be done pretty easily, but there could be issues where maybe maybe you have to take it in and out constantly, and that causes infection, that causes issues. And depending on the state of the patient, well, maybe it's best just to take the feeding tube out. That now has become extraordinary and causing more harm than it actually is giving good. That comes into play oftentimes also with like end-of-life palliative care in giving someone morphine, right? Because morphine, what tends to happen is, and correct me if I'm wrong, you tend to build up a tolerance. And so that means you have to keep on giving a higher and higher dose, which means someone could overdose on it, right? So it's very nuanced in these cases. There's even scenarios like about 500 years ago, if someone would have to amputate their leg, that would be justification to say, well, maybe we should just end your life. Because of the pain, because there's no anesthetic, that by losing that limb, you've now also taken away your way to provide for your family and yourself. And would you become more of a burden on your family by doing that, right? And also too, well, if infection get in, you're going to cause more harm and more damage. You're probably going to die from it anyway. Now, of course, as medicine advances, those issues become less and less extraordinary, right? And so that's why it's kind of a difficult thing in medical ethics, because it is constantly changing as science develops, as we get better at it, right? So that's important to keep in mind. So what I would advise, if you're in that scenario, is talk to a priest. That's the best thing to do, right? It's also good to actually have your will and testament, maybe your directives, your power of attorney. Someone's kind of engaged with these things to make these decisions if you are incapacitated, or at least help make those decisions. And there's actually resources in the church to help you do that too. Okay, so now the other aspect of this too, which comes up oftentimes, is what about the death penalty? So this has been a developed doctrine over time that the death penalty in general kind of goes in with, well, let's hold off on that. Let's come back to that, because let's talk about these different aspects first. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. So obviously intentional murder, that's always going to be a grave matter. As a matter of fact, we even see that in our justice system, right? We have first-degree murder and we have manslaughter, right? So in other words, first-degree murder, I'm planning it out and I'm doing it, right? That's more the mortal sin aspect. That's a little different than maybe I get into my car, I'm not paying attention, I hit someone with my car and they die, right? Obviously, that's still wrong. I took a life. I didn't mean to. I still did. But your culpability will be reduced in that regard, right? So there's kind of between a mortal sin and a venial sin. And even we also want to say, too, women who maybe procure abortion or men that help them, we also don't assume that's always a mortal sin either, right? Oftentimes, the tragedy of these things that women who go through this, and I work on the Respect Life Apostle. I've worked with Abortion Healing Ministry now for the last 6 years. The tragedy of women who experience it and the men, it's really devastating, causes a lot of trauma. And it takes years sometimes for them to understand that God still loves them. And that's a big thing, right? The other thing too, just as one point out, I think it's also fascinating as well that for every abortion facility we have in the United States, there actually are at least 6 different crisis pregnancy centers. But if you were to Google pregnancy help today, the first like 3 or 4 would be abortions. Here in St. Louis, for instance, we have one facility, Planned Parenthood, but we have at least 25 crisis pregnancy centers that a woman can turn to receive not only help before a pregnancy, but during her pregnancy, even after her pregnancy. Help raise the child, actually provide services for like job placement. And people don't know this or understand it. And that's sad. But yeah, there we go. All right. So when we talk about indirect or direct participation in these things, there's kind of just kind of between what we call formal cooperation and material cooperation. So let's say, for instance, I work in a hospital and my job is to put kits together for surgeries, right? I don't have any say whether these kits are used. There's general kits that are used in surgeries, but some go to surgeries, help with like heart surgeries, brain surgeries. Others go to like maybe providing euthanasia or abortion. Would we consider that formal or material cooperation? Or is it even at all?
I wouldn't say formal.
Okay,
Because
I would agree. Now that might be different than I'm the doctor or nurse performing that particular action of euthanasia. That'd probably definitely formal because I have actually direct action and it's through my actual actions that cause it. That would be considered formal. Now, in the aspect of this kit maker, yeah, I would say this material and maybe even like proximate material cooperation or remote, right? I think the difference in kind is how much say do you actually have in the action. So let's go a step further. Let's say you're a janitor that works in a hospital that performs euthanasia and abortion. Okay, maybe I'm working for a company that does that. But I definitely don't have any say on what happens in that regard. Now, one could argue, well, can you maybe find another job? Maybe can you actually kind of remove yourself from that situation? Well, again, that's more of maybe discernment, right? Because, well, boy, the job market's pretty bad right now. I have a family to feed, and this is the only way I can do that. Okay, right? So there are levels of that. That's when we talk about these things, especially with like the 5th commandment, the 6th commandment, and on. Now, when we start looking at this, though, more distinctly, is when we talk about defense of our person or maybe even our country, right? So military service, police, right? Even, let's say, you're up in your bed at night and you hear glass breaking downstairs and you just happen to have a baseball bat next to your bed and you go downstairs and you hear a noise, you start swinging and you hit somebody and you kill them with a baseball bat. Is that murder? Have you violated the 5th commandment?
Technically. No.
It was the self-defense rule, I suppose.
I was protecting I was defending myself.
Right.
I was even the fact I was scared didn't really have any regard to that.
Mhm.
can't wait till the person's got
Exactly right.
on your neck.
I didn't want to kill anybody,
Mhm.
but that could have been a possible outcome,
Yeah.
right? There is something called double effect that we have in the moral life, right? So in other words, maybe go back to the abortion issue. If I have to have a surgery And the potential, the reasonable outcome of that surgery would be that an abortion would happen, meaning the child would be killed in my womb, right? Can I still have that surgery?
I'm sorry.
Do you mean
Okay,
like
so
you
let's say I have ovarian cancer.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're saying the mom needs to
Right.
stay alive.
Right. I need
Yeah.
the surgery to stay alive, but I'm pregnant. And by doing the surgery, there is a reasonable outcome, and actually a highly probable outcome, that the child will die. Can I still have that surgery?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Oh, yeah, the mother's fine.
Well, yes. Yeah, I mean, so in other words, when double jeopardy means is I'm not willfully taking the life of that child. Now, maybe something I have to do to myself to protect myself that could actually take the life of the child. I can do that, though, because I'm not willingly doing it. I'm not willingly taking the life of the child. I'm really trying to save my life. So that goes guard with the same instance, right? So in other words, it's justified to try to save your own life. And even if another life is taken by doing that. So we see that more properly. Now, maybe a difference in kind might be, okay, let's say I'm upstairs in my bed. I hear glass breaking downstairs and I get all excited. Oh, good. I got my baseball bat. I get to take some life today. Well, that's a little different, right? In the same way, for a police officer or for a military serviceman, there's a difference kind of between, I know I have to defend my comrades. I know I have to defend my country. I hope I never have to take any life, but I might have to do that. A police officer, I'm walking the beat. I'm praying that nothing happens tonight, but there might be an opportunity where I actually have to use my revolver. I don't want to, but I might have to. I'm not willfully doing it, but to save my life and the life of other people, I might have to. There's a difference in the action in that regard.
How does that, whenever Jesus says, when someone strikes one cheek, you offer that pacifism, how does that?
Yeah. So pacifism is something that can be upheld if it's possible. So here's the thing, right? That aspect of turning the other cheek is actually an external showing that you're free, nothing can affect you in that regard, right? So it's otherwise, well, you hit me, go ahead, do it again. I don't, you don't affect me. It's actually a sign of freedom, right? And so in the same regard, it wouldn't necessarily be immoral for a police officer not to use a revolver in the act of a crime, but also you could say, well, if by not doing that, is he actually allowing more death to happen? Right?
Mhm.
That may even be a sin of omission. The difference is, do I have the actual authority and am I in the circumstance to actually do it? And is my intention to do it or not? Because it's a little bit different to say, okay, if you smack me in the face, oh, good, now I get to hit you there already. All right, here we go, right? That's much different than, well, hey, whatever you do to me, it's not going to offend me or hurt me. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So when we kind of talk about this in the aspects of what we call just war theory. So just war theory was developed by St. Augustine in the 4th century. It's important to understand that when we talk about these things, whether it be war, whether it be, trying to, protecting our life, whenever needs to be violence towards somebody, that's always a failure in charity and intellect, right? War is always a failure, but it may be necessary in certain circumstances. So the circumstance we look at is antebellum versus parabellum, meaning before the war begins and within the war. So before the war, there has to be a legitimate authority negotiating, right? So in other words, if I'm the president of the United States, I shouldn't be negotiating with a regular civilian about these things. All outlets of peace have been exhausted. We've tried everything and nothing's working. And one must be the defender, not the aggressor, right? Within war, non-participants should be allowed, meaning, well, hey, I'm a pacifist. I don't want to participate. That should be allowed. You shouldn't be forced into it, right? Against your conscience. Civilian protection. Non-combatants should be spared at all costs. And proportionalism. And that means, well, okay, if they're coming out with knives, I shouldn't go after them with tanks. needs to be proportional in the way we actually defend each other and protect.
So I'm assuming the Catholic Church is against draft.
In general, yes. Yeah.
And probably most wars.
Well, that's a good question, right?
There's
So,
always
because here's the thing, right? Everyone that participates in this needs to keep this up. So, in other words, if there's a violation against a non-combatant by a private in that military, that automatically removes that just war justification, right? So, in that regard, if you look back in history, has there actually been any?
Just wars?
Yeah.
No.
Right. I think you make an argument that no, right? Because these are very high bars to meet, right?
Well, was that First Crusade?
Well, okay, the First Crusade, okay, here's the thing, right? Were there atrocities done by maybe some of the Crusaders?
Yes.
Probably.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know off my head if any have been recorded, but there's probability that it was. Even though the outcome was good, the ends don't justify the means, and vice versa, right? So in that regard, yeah, even that would be considered, well, that wasn't great. The intention was good, and what the purpose of was good, but the individuals had to also maintain that too. But they also went the other way. I mean, when the papal states were reconquered, one would argue that actually worse atrocities happened in that reconquering than they were before, right? Okay, then when we talk about this proportionalism, then nuclear weapons,
Not very proportional.
no, right?
Very drastic.
Now, one can use those as a deterrent.
The threat of.
The threat of.
Yeah.
Now, but the problem is the intention needs to be never to use them. So that kind of loses the whole aspect of deterrent if you're not intended. Right, exactly, right. So it's one of these things where, and looking back like World War II, for instance, I mean, the justification of that was we'll lose many more people on both sides if we didn't use the nuclear weapon than if we didn't.
Right, that the war would be prolonged.
Right. But the problem there was that the nuclear weapon was indiscriminate.
Right.
Many civilians were killed. As a matter of fact, do you guys know where the highest population of Catholics was in Japan in 1945 for Hiroshima?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
A lot of Catholics died that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard of a church that was there and a priest that was there who went out and ministered
Mm-hmm.
to all the people. But for some reason, he wasn't hurt.
Grace of Orders. Any questions about that?
What was it you just said, Rick?
Grace of Orders?
Yeah.
Oh, Holy Orders.
Holier.
Oh.
The priest that I was
Oh.
talking about, he's saying he had grace. He wasn't affected by the nuclear bomb going off where everything else around him was devastated.
Or we had a lead bedroom, one of the two, who knows?
And he went out and he ministered
Definitely
to
one
the
of the
people.
That's right. Maybe both, who knows?
Yeah.
You have a long time too.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just read about him. I can't remember where.
Interesting. I hadn't heard that word.
So we are stewards, not owners of the life that God has entrusted to us. So it's not ours to dispose of, which also means that suicide is kind of a very tragic situation. It's a contrary to justice, hope, and charity. Now, again, this has been developed over time too, because there was a time where the Catholic Church would not do the funeral rites for someone who committed suicide.
Ask that, yeah.
Now, that was never definitively taught by the church.
Sure.
But it was still an aspect of grave matter because the thought was, well, this person committed the most serious offense against God and his gift. Now, we would say it's still grave matter to take your own life, but it may not be mortal sin because obviously someone who actually has been going through that, there's not a full deliberation and act of the will. And even at the point when that person died, there may be an aspect of openness to mercy. So we think of Judas, right? When Judas hung himself, is Judas in heaven, or at least in purgatory? I hope so. We hope that there was an openness to mercy in that regard. Some actually venerate Judas as a saint because the thought there is that he actually upheld his action in God's will. That's kind of an interesting discussion. It's not definitively taught one or another. But in general, we would say that people commit suicide because of what we knew now about in psychology, psychiatry, that there is a possibility that it's not a mortal sin. and one err on God's mercy rather than his judgment. Okay.
Many say that a person who takes their own life is mentally unstable.
But well,
To
yeah,
make that,
that would be the deliberation aspect. So
okay.
you're not fully culpable in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Okay. Peacemakers. Maybe some ideas of what killing may be. An aspect of the fifth commandment we never really thought much of. Pride, right? There's kind of a diminishment of the person involved with that. Anger. So this is kind of what we were talking about earlier between rational versus malicious. So we think about rational anger, that's actually like we think about Jesus in the temple, right? When he made a whip of cords and drove out the money changers and, knocked over tables. Was he angry?
Yes.
Yeah. He was angry because these people that he loves wasn't following what God wanted for them. And so in that regard, it's coming from a place of love, directed towards a place of love. And that would be considered righteous or rational anger. Now, us who are not God, we may experience that maybe with our children, especially in disciplining them. When they're not actually upholding what they're supposed to be doing, they're not following what we want and what God wants for them, that could cause anger in us, and that is perfectly rational. But there's difference, but also too, the way we may punish needs to be understood that way too.
So question,
Mm-hmm.
anger itself is not wrong, it's your action of it.
Correct.
Okay.
So again, whether it's rational or malicious is more the viceful side. That's more the vengeance. You hurt me, you offended me, I want to hurt you.
Action
Yeah.
associated
Mhm.
with the anger.
Well, not only the action, but also maybe the feeling. So in other words, if somebody cuts me off on the freeway, I might feel rational anger there in that, oh man, you're a human person, you should know better. And I'm mad at you because you should know better. That's much different than, I'm going to, you son of a, how dare you cut me off? Those are two different angers.
What about the in-between state? You're really angry, but you're not gonna take it out.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not taking it out. I'm not going to tailgate you. I'm not going to follow you home.
That's more okay, right?
But no, I mean, but if my anger is being directed towards, okay, you as a person who should know better.
Yeah.
I love you as a human person. What you did was wrong. And I'm angry because what you did was wrong. Compared to, oh, I want to destroy you. I'm not going to, but boy, if I had a crowbar right now, I would, that kind of thing, right?
I mean, like bad words might come out.
Well, that's second commandment thing, right?
You wouldn't hurt them.
Yeah. So, now if I actually say the word, yeah. Now, is that actually mortal or venial? Well, again, did I deliberate that and do it anyway? Or did I just let it go? Was I thinking about it or did I act out upon it? Right? Maybe I was thinking about the word, but I thought, you know what? I shouldn't do that. So again, it's hard sometimes to distinguish that line, but our conscience usually is the one that tells us where that is. Okay. Stubbornness. That is the death of the conscience and our intellect, right? Now, this one is probably one that's more common too. Did I eat or drink too much or in any other way hurt my body? Overindulgence, mutilation, gluttony. These are all kind of a death in one way. They're maybe not an immediate death, but slowly over time, right? If that habit persists. Hate. Again, this is the death of charity. I'll lead others into sin by my bad example. Scandal. Was I mean or cruel to animals? Okay. Or maybe even so far, did I not maybe uphold the environment? I litter. So this leads to a point. Is hunting okay?
Depends on what you're hunting for.
Doesn't
And
God
what you're going
provide
to
you
do
with
with it.
Sure. I think that's the point though, Moira, is okay. Exactly. Am I doing this as a sport? Am I doing this actually because I'm going to eat the meat? Am I going to, even a sport, am I still going to for deer hunting?
Yeah.
I'm still going to produce the meat and I'll use the skin. Sure.
Right.
Good.
Mhm.
But, if you shoot an animal just bleeding out there, dying, well, that doesn't seem very sporty nor necessary.
Mhm.
Right.
It's a waste.
Yes. So in that regard, yeah, I mean, hunting is okay provided it's for that proper end, right?
Or if it's like there is a point where there are getting to be so many deer, like out
Yeah.
St. Anne where my sister.
Yeah.
I drive down her street sometimes and I see them going between the houses.
Yeah.
And she
Well-
happens to have a huge backyard and they're there by a big pond.
Yeah. That's a good point,
But now
Kathy.
you see
Yeah.
them going, people feed them for one
Yeah.
thing. So they go back
Well,
and forth between houses.
Someone brought up yesterday too, like discussion, like, well, what if I have a mouse in my house or a rat? You know, well, you could say that's actually a attack. They're violating your space. They're taking over your area.
And there's a strong potential for
Disease, right? So in other words, there are calculus involved with that. It's like, okay, well, boy, a cockroach. Oh boy, okay, well, yeah,
Very disease.
exactly. Well, that's the whole point, right? So in other words, yeah, would it be justified? Of course, because I'm trying to uphold my health. I'm trying to protect myself. Yeah. Well, again, but still, I'm still trying to protect myself. Yeah, there may be more humane ways of doing that, and so we should do the best we can in the circumstances we find ourselves. But in general, no, you're protecting your health. So that gets in the same way if someone tries to break into your house, I'm justified, right?
I was working one place where they would do glue traps for mice. And I thought that was
Yeah.
find something, put them instantly more they could get stuck in that. Just didn't like that.
Finally, tonight, a topic that actually falls under the fifth commandment, but also under the eighth commandment in some ways too, is gossip. So gossip is considered an assassination of character. And there are three aspects of gossip. There's truthfulness, charity, and company. So in other words, let's say I'm at work and a good friend of mine, my coworker, is having a bad day taking out on me. And I go home to my spouse and I say, boy, Jim was just being a real jerk today. Well, okay, maybe that was true. Maybe I would say that in front of Jim. But my spouse doesn't know Jim. And so in that way, there's not an assassination of character there because there's no relationship there. That's much different than if I'm in the break room and saying, oh, Jim is being a jerk today. That could be assassination of character, right?
But it's truth.
It may be truth, but also not charitable,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
So now, again, if I'm speaking to my spouse, maybe I'm just venting, which is perfectly fine, right? That's good. That's healthy. We have to be aware of those scenarios. And if one of those are disordered, we should probably change the topic.
So even if it's true, if it puts them in like a negative light to go to charity, then okay.
You always want to hold charitableness, right? And so charitable typically would be what I say in front of the person, and then when they're at company, be saying these things, right? That's kind of what it would come down to.
Even if it's bad and you still feel like you would say it in front of the person.
So again, it doesn't have to be negative. It can still be negative. Negative can still be charitable,
Yeah.
right? When I say someone don't do that
Mhm.
for your own good, that's negative.
Yeah.
But it's for their own good benefit, right?
Right.
Yeah. So like, hey Jim, you're being a real jerk today. That's not meant to actually demean them. It's actually meant to help them. Like, hey,
Snap.
get with it, buddy. Yeah, what's going
People don't
on?
take that very well.
They may not. And there's better. So we also deliver the truth and love too, right? So like, hey Jim, something going on? I mean, so again, so to actually walk with somebody in those things takes a lot more energy and time, but also is the most charitable thing we can do.
The school I worked at, there was a sign. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind?
Yeah, I think that's very much in line with Catholic principles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If not, it's
Yeah,
gossip.
it does need to be, right?
These are hard habits to break.
Sorry,
They
my
are.
fault.
They are. But in that regard, though, too, that's why they're worth it,
Yeah.
right? Because these habits are. And here's the thing: you may never break it. The question we have to ask is: are we getting better in it? Right. That's what the grace of the sacrament of reconciliation help us do, and the Eucharist. So it's not necessarily perfection; it's about progress in these things, right?
So these are not all encompassing.
No, not necessarily. There could be other aspects of this too, right? But in general, like I said, there's always a consistent life ethic in charity, right? And so
Well,
we're
I was
always.
thinking in vitro.
Well, yeah, I was going to talk about that more next week with the Sixth Commandment because that's really more in line with the marital act. So we'll talk about that next week.
Okay.
Yeah, because next week,
Quick preview.
yeah, Kathy jumping ahead of me all the time.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That. Are there any questions about this week? Anything we've talked about tonight? Good, Artie. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like a lot of the martyrs,
Oh yeah.
like when they knew that, and everyone, I mean, even Jesus, like the apostles are like, hey, pump the brakes. What you're doing here is suicide.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Okay. So is it? So again, there is something like suicide by cop, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I didn't necessarily take my own life, but I put myself in a scenario where someone else would or had to, right? The martyrs, okay, we have to look at this like the way I put this in context is like when I'm talking to the school kids over there, and sometimes a little graphic. With the older kids, I usually say this, but not the senior kids. Let's say there's a gunman that comes in here, right, and has the intention to shoot us all. Would it be immoral for you to actually dunk under the desk and try to save your own life instead of everyone else's? No. Okay, so they were not violating the fifth commandment by doing that. But going beyond the fifth commandment, it'd be heroic charity and heroic virtue to jump in front of the gunman and have them shoot me, right? Even if I intend to do that, let's say right now I'm intending, if a gunman comes here, first thing I'm going to do is jump up and jump in front of him and protect everybody else. I'm upholding life. I'm also showing heroic virtue by putting my life before yours, which is what martyrs are made of. So even in that regard, what control do you have, right? In the martyr situation, well, yeah, if they just offered sacrifice to the gods, they'd be set free. But are they violating the first command by doing that? Yeah. So in other words, I can't uphold one command by violating the other, right? In the same way. You have to look at that scenario too. Now you're right. Some martyrs did go gladly and joyfully to their death. Okay, but what else could they do? I mean, Jesus, could he come off the cross? He could have. But again, he's God. It's a little different for him.
right.
And if we're following his example, he's calling us to heroic virtue, not just the minimum, right? So again, it wouldn't be a violation if you were to try to protect your own life if a company came in here. You would not be sinning in doing that. Actually, be upholding the fifth commandment, protecting your life. But you would exhibit heroic virtue if you were to jump in front of the gunman and try to protect everyone else. Above and beyond, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Saturday, the 21st, rite of election. We were asked to be there by 12:45.
Do we have assigned seats?
We do, but I don't have it yet. He says he's going to send out this week. So once I have it, I'll send out to everybody.
I guess my question is, for how many people, and there's a lot of us catechists, should we stay home and let?
No, there'll be
them-
plenty. There'll be plenty of
There'll
space.
be
Even if
plenty.
we don't sit next to each other, we'll make sure we have pews available. They have plenty of pews. I say that, but okay. So I'm just going to break down how this is going to work. So,
1:15,
we'll be there by 12:45. So we're going to meet back. There's a vestibule in the back of the cathedral that there's 3 doors that face Lindell Boulevard. We'll meet back there by the security desk. We'll meet there. We'll go to our pews. We'll sit down. Once we put our stuff down, we'll then have an opportunity to go meet the Archbishop. So he'll probably take a picture with us, come back to our seats. The rite begins at 1:30. So the way this works is it looks kind of like a mass. It's a liturgy of the word. So there's a session in. They'll have a gospel reading, maybe the gospel for the day. I don't know. And then what happens after the homily is they're going to call your names, right? So the first we're going to call is the catechumens. Now, in previous years, what would happen is you would go up into the sanctuary of the cathedral, and they'll line you up in front of the altar. We're not doing that this year. You're just going to stand up in your pew. The reason we're not doing that this year is because we have so many people entering the church, we can't fit everybody in the sanctuary. That's a good problem to have. Once the blessing of the bishop is given, we'll sit down, and then they're going to call all the candidates, and you as well will just stand up in your spot, right? If your sponsor's there, great. If not, that's fine too. And then I'll give everyone a blessing, and we sit down, and then I'll give everyone a final blessing, process out. That's it. It probably lasts about 45 minutes. We'll then have an opportunity for a tour, right? So we'll come from our pews and go start the tour, probably start in the back and just kind of go around. And then after that, if you want to leave after the rite, you're free to do that. If you want to leave after the tour, you're free to do that. Okay. As far as seating is concerned, I believe we reserved 4 pews. I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
But they haven't given us a seating chart yet. They're going to send it out this week. So once I get that, I'll send it out to you guys and let you know. They'll have our parish labeled on the ends of the pews.
Yeah.
So who knows where to sit.
Is there space for your significant other, or like even if he has to sit somewhere?
Yeah, I should be space available for everybody, I imagine. If not, we'll make room. We'll be able to cram everyone in.
So in a pew, you should be able to fit between 8 and 10
Give or take.
deciding, so we could have up to 40.
Yeah,
people.
give or take, sure.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna stay home if you needed space.
I mean, it doesn't matter. We'll have, if we sit with us, we'll have other spaces available.
Okay.
This isn't the one down by St. Louis, right?
On Lindell, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, not the one by the arch. This is, that's not a cathedral, it's a basilica. Yeah.
Just double check.
Yeah. Actually, I have the address. I have it on here. I just don't have it. I have it on here, I think. The schedule. Yeah. 4431 Lindell Boulevard, 63108. So if you need to put that in your GPS. Also, I'll send out on a flock note kind of a map of the parking where we're going to meet. So you can look at that and give you a reference. Okay. Yeah, that's why I advise get there like 12:45 because parking does fill up quick.
Oh, yeah.
And there's not a lot of it.
What if we can't do the Regalia Center retreat? You mentioned that we would do something else for reconciliation if we can't do that.
Yeah, we can meet some other time during Holy Week to do that.
Yeah.
So there'll be plenty of opportunity. Either so I think we're having will be 6 different opportunities on Good Friday. But also during the week we have daily confessions. So
okay,
you can make it work.
Yeah.
Just let me know.
I just have to peek at it. I just want to know just in case.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. And if you need to lead early from that or whatever, that's fine too. Even within that retreat, we can kind of make it work.
Okay.
Okay. Thoughts, comments, concerns, questions, heresies? All right. Well, thanks everybody. We'll see you on Saturday, if not sooner.
Yeah. Thanks, you Saturday, right?